Nestled within the pages of Matthew's Gospel lies a profound lesson on forgiveness. Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35, presents Jesus' encounter with Peter and the parable of the unforgiving servant. This passage delves into the very essence of Christian faith, revealing the transformative power of forgiveness and challenging us to mirror God's immeasurable grace in our own lives. Jesus, the master storyteller, uses a simple yet powerful parable to illustrate a profound truth. He reminds us that we are all recipients of a debt we could never repay. Yet in His infinite mercy, God offers us forgiveness freely. This parable serves as a looking glass, reflecting our own capacity for forgiveness. It challenges us to examine our hearts and confront any bitterness or resentment that hinders our ability to extend grace to others. Peter, ever the eager disciple, approaches Jesus with a seemingly straightforward question. "Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times?" Peter likely thought this display of generosity exceeded expectations. He envisioned a clear limit on forgiveness, a numerical boundary to contain this radical act. Jesus' response, however, shatters any notion of limitations. "I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times, he declares. With these words, Jesus abolishes the very concept of keeping score. Forgiveness, in his eyes, knows no bounds. This exchange sets the stage for a powerful lesson. Jesus reveals that forgiveness is not a matter of tallying offenses. It is a posture of the heart, a willingness to release others from the debt of their wrongdoing, just as God, in Christ, has released us. Jesus then unveils the parable of the unforgiving servant. A king, preparing to settle accounts with his servants, encounters one indebted for an astronomical sum. The servant pleads for mercy, and the king, moved with compassion, cancels the entire debt. This act of grace is both extravagant and unmerited. However, the forgiven servant then encounters a fellow servant who owes him a paltry sum. Instead of extending the same mercy he received, he seizes his debtor, demanding immediate repayment. The forgiven servant's actions stand in stark contrast to the king's compassion. The king, learning of this injustice, is enraged. He throws the unforgiving servant into prison, demanding full payment. This powerful image illustrates the gravity of withholding forgiveness, especially in light of the immense mercy we have received from God. Forgiveness lies at the very core of the Christian faith. It is not merely a suggestion or a virtuous ideal. It is the lifeblood of our relationship with God and with one another. We are called to forgive because we have been forgiven. The parable highlights the staggering reality of our own sinfulness. Like the servant who owed an insurmountable debt, we stand guilty before a holy God. Our transgressions, though seemingly insignificant compared to God's holiness, create a chasm between us and our Creator. Yet God, in His infinite love, offers us a gift we could never earn or deserve: forgiveness. Through Christ's sacrifice on the cross, the debt of our sin is fully paid. We are set free, not because of our own merit, but because of His unfathomable grace. Section 5. The ultimate sacrifice. Jesus' death on the cross embodies the ultimate act of forgiveness. He, the sinless Son of God, willingly took upon Himself the weight of the world's sin. He endured the agony of the cross not for any wrongdoing of His own, but to reconcile us to the Father. In that moment of ultimate sacrifice, Jesus demonstrated the boundless nature of divine forgiveness. He offered pardon to those who mocked Him, to the soldiers who nailed Him to the cross, to all who had contributed to His suffering. Jesus' death and resurrection paved the way for our forgiveness. Because of His sacrifice, we can experience the fullness of God's love and grace. We are no longer defined by our past mistakes, but are made new in Christ. Section 6. The difficulty of forgiveness. Forgiveness, though central to our faith, is rarely easy. It requires us to confront our pain, release our desire for revenge, and choose compassion over bitterness. It means relinquishing our perceived right to hold on to anger and resentment. The parable of the unforgiving servant reveals the human tendency to cling to grudges. We may readily accept forgiveness from God, yet struggle to extend that same grace to others. The pain of betrayal, hurt, or injustice can leave us feeling justified in withholding forgiveness. Forgiving others does not mean condoning their actions or minimizing the harm caused. It means choosing to release them from the debt of their wrongdoing, acknowledging that we too are recipients of unearned grace. Section 7. Choosing forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a feeling, but a choice, a deliberate act of the will. It is a process, not a one-time event. There may be times when we need to choose forgiveness again and again, each time chipping away at the wall of resentment that separates us from others and from God. Choosing forgiveness does not mean we will immediately forget the wrong committed against us. It does, however, free us from the grip of bitterness and resentment. It allows us to move forward, not weighed down by the chains of the past. When we choose forgiveness, we open ourselves to healing and reconciliation. We create space for God's grace to flow through us, transforming our hearts and relationships. Section 8. The ripple effect. The act of forgiveness has a ripple effect, extending far beyond the initial act of grace. When we choose to forgive, we break the cycle of bitterness and resentment, creating a space for healing and reconciliation to take root. Forgiveness has the power to transform individuals, relationships, and even entire communities. When we release others from the debt of their wrongdoing, we open the door for compassion, empathy, and understanding to flourish. By embracing forgiveness, we become agents of God's grace in a world desperately in need of healing and reconciliation. We become reflections of Christ's love, extending mercy and compassion to those around us. Section 9. Freedom in forgiveness. Forgiveness is not only an act of obedience, but also an act of liberation. When we hold on to anger and resentment, we imprison ourselves in a cycle of negativity and pain. Forgiveness sets us free. When we choose to forgive, we release ourselves from the burden of bitterness, resentment, and the desire for revenge. We experience the freedom that comes from letting go of the past and embracing the present. This freedom allows us to move forward with our lives, unhindered by the weight of past hurts. It allows us to experience the fullness of God's love and grace, both for ourselves and for others. Section 10. Living out His love. Jesus' command to forgive is not a burdensome obligation, but an invitation to experience the transformative power of God's grace in our own lives. It is a call to become more like Him, to reflect His heart of love, mercy, and compassion. As we strive to live out His love in our daily lives, we will inevitably encounter opportunities to forgive. These moments, though often challenging, offer us a chance to grow in our faith and become more like Christ. By embracing forgiveness, we participate in the divine work of redemption and reconciliation. We become instruments of His grace, extending His love and mercy to a world in desperate need of healing. Section 11. Embracing grace, extending grace. The parable of the unforgiving servant serves as a timeless reminder of the immeasurable grace we have received and the call to extend that same grace to others. It is a challenge to examine our hearts, confront any bitterness or resentment we may harbor, and choose the path of forgiveness. May we, like the king in the parable, be moved by compassion and offer forgiveness freely, without keeping a record of wrongs. May we embrace the freedom and healing that come from extending grace, becoming reflections of God's boundless love in a world hungry for forgiveness.